I think there's also an increased expectation from companies, that they need to play the role, not just, about running a profitable business, but a successful, social change.
Yeah.
Totally. There is an expectation, and as a function, HR needs to help the business actually drive that social environmental change. Look at how ESG is important. It's not just important because rating agencies use it. It's an expectation from the society that companies need to step in and step up. And function needs to, HR as a function needs to play a key role in that.
Yeah. That's such a good point, Tripti, because my little company is going through its B Corporation accreditation. It is so slow because they're overwhelmed, because people recognise they want to be accredited against those kinds of standards. Totally with you on that.
I think it's it was Dave Ulrich said about I think he talked about climate change, which I'm interested in, because he was talking about shareholders and customers and people demanding basically that companies are much more hot on their sort of environmental, not just like to kind of like, sure, we've done a little bit, but actually becoming increasingly important. But what was quite interesting is what Dave said, and I don't think I'm misquoting exactly what he was saying, and it's definitely paraphrased. It's just kind of what I remember and took from it. But that HR should be responsible for looking at things like climate change and environmental policy and things like that, which I thought was quite an interesting aspect. Do you sort of see that as well when we're talking about this ethical leadership? Do you think that climate change and that is part of what HR should be really tackling at this time and in the future?
I don't think so. I really don't. We need to focus on what our area of expertise is, and that's people. And I can do more good for the world by making sure that employees are getting proper pay, that they're having proper breaks, that they're having managers that are trained to manage, that there is a good environment there. I can't be all things to all people. And so I'm saying, let's let the scientists and the politicians, who I really think the politicians are worthless, but they've got the ones with the pens. But let's let them sort that out. And we can support a company initiative, more green or whatever. But my focus needs to be on making businesses a good environment for humans. Because if I spread myself thin and I'm like, oh, well, let's worry about this and let's worry about that and let's worry about this, then suddenly I have a toxic workplace. And whose fault is that? It's mine, because I was busy off doing everything else but my primary function.
My view is a bit different. So,
go on, Tripti. I was intrigued about what you might say. I was hoping you would come in, because
I can tell that Tripti has a little bit different opinion than I do.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. So there is a space HR owns and needs to drive, which is all around diversity, equality, inclusion, the culture at the workplace, well-being, a lot of it. And there are places which as a function, we don't own, but we play a critical role. How does that benefits policies look like in future that does enable a better climate? So you'll have a procurement team or your facilities team that can come up with a new car policy. How do you make sure that's equitable? How do you make sure that is embedded in the realities of that country? And so there is a role that the function has. I think the biggest role it can play is by building leaders that are leaders for the society, for the company and society, who think about it. HR doesn't have to drive that climate change themselves, but they could groom leaders which think about successful, profitable business, but also leading social change.
We've had a comment come through from Catalin, just say, she agrees that climate change would be part of sustainability and therefore should be part of HR's remit. I do think it's an interesting one, because there's an argument to sort of suggest that organizations could probably have an environmental or I don't know what you call it, but a sort of team that kind of looks at that sort of stuff and really pushes that forwards. As certainly bigger organisations, you could see that could be another scenario. But yeah, it was quite interesting because it was brought up obviously back in April. Perry, we didn't come to you in terms of your thoughts on that question.
I think Suzanne's got it right that we don't own it because we do have enough already on the plate, right? And so we need to think about what we can get rid of because there's totally too much in our stack already. So I agree we don't own it, but I think if it matters to people, it will matter to us because our recruitment techniques, where people work, how we help with behaviours, all those kind of things, I think they'll come and channel through us. So I think we will have a watching brief and a very active role to play within it. But Suzanne's right. I don't think we own it. I think we are really active in it, but we don't own it. That's my thought.